I don't know if you can relate to this, but my parents growing up, I thought my parents were crazy. You know, I never understood why my dad would always tell me, be careful who your friends are. Like I never now the school I went to, we had a reputation, and sometimes people go, well, is it a good reputation or a bad reputation? I would say we had a sketchy reputation as a class. We were called the worst class to ever move up into this school. They were like, oh, that's the worst class. And I was like, I got to be a part of the worst class. That was my class. And I remember a teacher saying, you know, when you start off in high school, look around because not everyone is going to make it. And I thought, what do you mean not everyone's going to make it? And we had the biggest class. We had the biggest class and the worst class. And it was amazing at the end of the year, at the end of the 4 years, how many people didn't make it. I wonder why my dad was a little crazy when I would ask him, Dad, can I get my eyebrow pierced? You know, I think I would look kind of cool. I don't know why I wanted my eyebrow pierced. It was just something kind of, I was like, Dad, I want my eyebrow pierced. And he would always say, Greg, who are you hanging out with? And I'm like, Dad, I'm not hanging out with anyone. I just think it would be cool to have a little eyebrow piercing, a little hole in my head right there. You know, I think it would be kind of cool. And my dad's like, who are you hanging out with? I remember one time I said, Dad, can I get a tattoo? I want a tattoo like right here, like a really cool tattoo. I'll get a cross, you know, like a cool cross if you want me to. And then he would always say, Greg, who are you hanging out with? And I always kind of roll my eyes and be like, Dad, it's not who I'm hanging out with. I just want, I'm my own person. That's what I would say. I'm my own person. But you know what? He realized something. He realized something that the friends that you keep can either be a good thing or a bad thing. I remember I wanted to go to prom, and I said, can I go to prom? And this is the girl I would select. And my parents told me no. They said, no, you're not going to prom with her. I was like, what do you mean not going to prom with her? Like she's like a 10 out of 10, you know, like that's good, right? And this is what they said. This is what my parents said. It is her character that we don't like. I couldn't go to prom. I could go to my junior prom. And I was like, oh my goodness, Mom and Dad. Like, why? Because they knew that in 1 Corinthians, there's a verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33 that says this, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. But you know what's interesting? We do the opposite, though. We do the opposite. We say things like, you know what? I'm going to date this person, this guy or this girl, and you know what? I know they don't go to church. I know they don't love Jesus, but guess what? I can help them be a good person. We have a term for that. I don't know if you are aware of the term, but the term is called missionary dating. We become missionaries on the dating force and be like, Mom, Dad, don't worry. They won't corrupt me. I'll corrupt them. Right? I'll corrupt them for the good. You know, even if you look at when you play sports, you know, coaches get it. Coaches get it because if a kid doesn't do what the coach says to do, the coach calls him a term that like becomes off limits to all the other coaches. When a player does things that goes against the coach calls him uncoachable. So when a coach calls someone uncoachable, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing, and that means that all the coaches are going to say, "Whoop, I'm not going to touch this kid." Why? Because his coach said he's uncoachable. See, parents worry about their kids and the kids and their friends. And there's a reason to worry. There's a reason for it because who you allow in your close inner circle influences you for right or for wrong. It's not just kids and students, but sometimes we as adults, we do the same thing. When a wife who's been faithful to her husband for years suddenly decides that she's unhappy, that she wants out, I have to ask, who is speaking into her life? Or who's speaking into his life? It's obvious that we're listening to a new voice. When an addict has been clean for a long time and all of a sudden drops out of church and relapses, we wonder, who is that person that they're listening to? It's probably safe to assume that they have figured out, they've reconnected with their old friends, their old life, who pulled them back into the old habits. When someone who has been reasonable suddenly becomes angry and opinionated, argumentative and unreasonable, I know that there's a new voice in their life. When a student who has always loved and listened to her parents suddenly turns rebellious and withdrawn, there is a new voice in their life. You see, when an encourager becomes critical and nitpicky, I wonder, well, who are they listening to? When someone who's kind and loyal suddenly starts to spread gossip, I want to know, who's that influence in their life? When a member of the church who has loved and supported the ministry begins to undermine leadership, it's obvious that there's a new toxic voice in their life. And most of the time, new opinions and attitudes come from listening to a new voice. But when you're in the middle of it, when it's you're in the middle of it, you don't recognize it, but those around you easily see it. If you listen to the wrong voice, you'll make the wrong decisions, you go the wrong direction, and you quit listening to the right voices. So we're continuing to look at the book of Jude. Jude, this is a letter that was written to the church because at this point there's a lot of things happening. They've been taught one thing, and now there's these people called false teachers who are now spreading some information that's not right. And so what has to happen is they gotta, Jude, he's kind of bringing them all the way back. You see, the early Christians at this time, they rejected moral, righteous living. So these are the false teachers. They taught the parts of the Old Testament. They focused on holiness and morality. But then the teaching was, hey, these are outdated and they're wrong. So they were ruled by their desires and passions instead of being led by God. Not only that, they expected the churches to support their ministries in the process. So people were falling for it. They were attracted to a do what you want, anything goes religion. And if you missed last week, you can catch up on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/firstlr. But today we're going to look at verse 11. Verse 11 says this, what sorrow awaits them. For they will, oh wait, I forgot to tell you, this is directed at the false teachers. So if it seems a little like, man, that's a little harsh, well, it's because there's false teachers in the mix, and they go, hey, we're just gonna call it out right here. So this is him calling it out. What sorrow awaits them, for they follow in the footsteps of Cain, who killed his brother. Like Balaam, they deceive people for money, and like Korah, they perish in the rebellion. So Judah, he uses a lot of, and sometimes we go, man, what does this even mean? Well, Judah knows that there are bad people in the Old Testament, and to describe their actions of the false teachers, he just uses this imagery. So like Cain, they are violent and they are jealous. Like Balaam, their goal is money and wealth, and like Korah, they rebel against spiritual authority. Verse 12 says, when these people eat with you in your fellowship meals, commemorating the Lord's love. So we look at this, we see fellowship meals is a big thing in the Bible. And that's why we're going to have after this service, we're going to go out and we're going to feast together. So everyone's invited after church. We're going to have our Thanksgiving feast. So feasting is biblical. When you go, why do you guys have food for everything? Well, that's a biblical thing. We got to feast together. We got to have communion together. It just got to be all part of what we do. But in this church-involved eating, at this time, you have the spiritual people there, the people that are following Jesus, and then you got your false teachers. They're all celebrating together. That would be kind of awkward, right? They eat together, they pray together, they eat some more, they laugh. But in this case, the false teachers are joining the meals. They're deeply involved within the people in the church life. They weren't outsiders, but they had become insiders. They were devious, they were deceptive, and they manipulated, and they were sitting at the table. Maybe it sounds like some of you guys' Thanksgiving meals, okay? I don't know. You just you looking around like, oh, what's about to happen? That's what happened in our home. That we took bets every Thanksgiving. Who's gonna start the fight? What uncle's gonna come in and start the fight today. That was my Thanksgiving growing up. So luckily, I don't have that anymore. But Jude decided, hey, it's enough. We got to call this out. And he uses this imagery. In verse 12, it says, when these people eat with you in your fellowship meals, commemorating the Lord's love, they are like dangerous reefs that can shipwreck you. So in those days, if you should travel a long ways, you didn't just get in a car because they didn't have planes, trains, or automobiles. They had ships. And so what they did was, if you had money, you got into a ship and you left. And so these people in this portion of the scripture, they are talking about how they are dangerous reefs that can shipwreck you. A reef is a ridge of jagged rock of coral or sand just above or just below the surface of the sea. A ridge above the surface of the sea, well, that's not that dangerous because you can see it. But if you get a little bit under, if it goes a little bit under, well, that becomes a little bit more dangerous because you can't see what's underneath it. But a ridge below the surface of the sea, dangerous and also deadly. So they didn't have sonar back then. They couldn't tell if they were getting into dangerous territory. The water could appear calm and pleasant, and then suddenly the boat could hit a reef, and it could rip a hole open into the ship. The ship would then sink because of the danger the captain couldn't see. So a dangerous reef is a wrong voice that is difficult to detect. A dangerous reef is a wrong voice that is difficult to detect. So the cleverly, guess what? They hid their sin, and they do their best to deceive you. You fall for their lies, and you don't see the danger. A wrong voice, it's going to sink you when you least expect it. There are 3 million shipwrecks scattered across the world's oceans. There are far more life wrecks because people didn't see the danger until it was too late. See, Jude continued. He said this, they are like shameless shepherds who care only for themselves. Again, Judah used familiar imagery here. Shepherds had one job. That one job was to take care of their sheep. Shepherds, they put themselves in harm's way. They prepared. We talked about it a couple of years ago when we talked about the Lord as our shepherd. They go in and they prepare the land. They make sure if there's something that's going to harm the sheep, they dig it out, they prepare it, they get it ready so that the sheep can sit there and hang out and be safe. But what Jude is saying is, hey, these shepherds, they're just about themselves. They're not about you, but they're about themselves. They may appear to be like you before you, but they're not. They're just for themselves. John 10:11 says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. See, the false teachers, they claimed to lead. They claimed to guide God's people, but they had no concern for anyone but themselves. They didn't care for their flock, but instead they used their positions of leadership to establish a comfortable life for themselves. So the false teachers, they were the shameless shepherds. And the shameless shepherds, wrong voice, doesn't care about you, but they're focused on themselves. They're focused on what they want, what they need, and how they can get it. They're greedy and self-centered. It's like when you're in a dating relationship, it's that boyfriend that tempts you to have sex, and then when you decide, hey, I don't want to, or you give in to the temptation, and then they dump you because that's all they wanted. It's your friend who convinces you to start drinking again, but then leaves you when you're out of control. Shameless shepherds abandon you at the first sign of trouble. See, they are like clouds blowing over the land without giving any rain. So again, Jude uses this imagery. See, Palestine is a dry climate. The people were often desperate for rain, so if the clouds formed but no rain fell, well, the result was bitter disappointment. See, these false teachers were like rain clouds that they promised much, but they delivered little. So watch out for them people that promise everything. Hey, let me promise you these things. And then the delivery is nothing. See, the wrong voice gets your hopes up, but it doesn't deliver. They don't keep their promises, or even they don't even follow through. There are lots of promises, but there are not a lot of results. They claim that you're going to get married soon. Baby, we'll get married soon. It'll be all right. But it never happens. Financial advisors, they make that promises. They say, hey, if you put all this money in, or you don't have no money, big rewards, no risk, big rewards. Guess what? Well, that's not the truth. They're promising you something that doesn't ever exist. Commercials about alcohol. We say, man, look at that. Oh, it looks so comfortable. Being under a palm tree at the beach, man, having a beer. It looks innocent. But what about the people who are addicted? And the lives that it's destroyed, the marriages that it's destroyed over one drink. Maybe the enjoy it now, the pay later was your motto for years, and you enjoyed a lot, but now the bills are due. That credit card that was once your ticket to happiness has turned into a fast pass to misery and also to shame. You never fully understood what immediate gratification would actually cost. But they said it would help you with pain, but now you're hopelessly addicted. Lots of big promises, but no real results. See, they're like the clouds blowing over the land without giving any rain. They're like the trees in the autumn that are doubly dead, for they bear no fruit and have been pulled up by the roots. So fruit trees were tended to. They were nurtured, and they were supposed to bring fruit. And if they gave nothing during the fruit season, guess what? They were uprooted and they were worthless. They were double dead because there was no fruit, and because they had to been pulled up, they would never bear fruit. So they didn't wait till another year. They just, hey, we're going to uproot this thing, get it out of here, put something else that's going to bear the fruit. Double dead trees. They were false teachers that didn't have the fruit of the Spirit or a righteous, godly life. So there was no evidence of the special relationship with God they claimed to have. They talked a good game, but guess what? They didn't live it out. Verse 13 says, they are like wild waves of the sea, churning up the foam of their shameful deeds. Again, another image that was familiar to the original readers. Big wild waves, they crash against the shore. When the ocean finally pulls back, the beach is covered with dirty, nasty junk. Have you ever gone out to the ocean after the tide went out? It's not a pleasant sight. It's kind of like, man, what is all this nasty? You got this seaweed that's all over the place. You got bottles and all this stuff that's around. It doesn't look good. In fact, it looks nasty with all the junk. Wild waves, they bring bad things to the surface. Wrong voices do that same thing. They leave a lot of trash behind. They bring gossip and false information and remind you of your past hurts. They fill your life with bad stories, broken dreams, broken hearts, messed up lives, and controversy. Their goal is to pull you out, is to pull out the worst in you. So wrong voices want to keep the drama going. You know, it's always fascinating when I'm a people watcher. So I'll be out with everyone, and my wife's like, "What are you doing?" She knows that I'm just watching people. My favorite thing is just to go to the mall, sit at the courtyard, and just watch people. I love it. And sometimes it's heartbreaking, but you know that person that loves drama. Because guess what? They don't hang out with healthy people. They hang out with broken people that also love drama, that feed off the drama. And you can always see them kind of going and feasting for more. So what we got to be careful is the wrong voices, the drama. Because they're like wild waves. When they finally go, guess what? They're going to leave behind a wreck. See, Jude finished describing the false teachers, the wrong voices, with one more image. He says they're like wandering stars doomed forever to the blackest darkness. False teachers are like shooting stars. You're like, wow, that's awesome. And then they're gone. Where do they go? They attract the attention. There's this big show, but guess what? They quickly flame out and they quickly disappear. There are good times and then gone in the bad times. Wrong voices often look good, they're impressive, and they seem popular. They often draw a crowd with words and ideas, but ultimately they accomplish nothing but the show. See, there's no substance or even direction. They lead you nowhere. Now, that's an amazing picture of wrong voices. We got dangerous reefs that will sink your ship, shameless shepherds that put themselves first, rainless clouds that make a lot of promises that don't keep, double dead trees that there's no fruit that comes from it, wild waves that leave behind trash and turmoil, and shooting stars. There's a big show, but leads you nowhere. See, my dad had a reason to worry about my friends. He had a reason to really question my motives and who I was hanging out with, because he knew who I was hanging out with would eventually lead me to where I didn't want to go. You know, I grew up in a small town in Michigan. It was so small that the only thing I wanted to do, here's my one goal, okay? I don't know if I've ever told this to you guys, but my one goal was to get out. That was my one goal. I didn't know how to get out. I just, like, everything revolved around Muskegon, Michigan, this whole thing. When I go back, people will recognize me for one thing. And we go back to high school all over again. We're that small town. I didn't realize I was a redneck until I went back and visited. I was like, oh, we're all a bunch of rednecks. That's what we are. But I knew I needed to get out, because here's the thing about where I lived. If you wanted to be something different, you knew you couldn't stay there. Because if you stayed there, you just became a product of the environment. The product of the environment was I was going to work at a chemical plant. There's nothing wrong with chemical plants, but I just didn't want to work at the chemical plant. I didn't want to work at the grocery store. I wanted something a little bit different. I didn't know how to do it, but I knew I had to be careful of the people that I was hanging out with. And so what we got to do is you got to surround yourself with the right voices. And so what we got to do is we got to upgrade our lives a little bit, okay? We got to look at where our friends are going, or where your family may be, and you go, you know what? I don't want to do this. I need to upgrade my life. I need to bring my life a little bit different. On the other hand, when you surround yourself with the right voices, good things do happen. You find people that they encourage you to do right. People, they will help you think right and challenge you when you're off track, when you're getting a little off. They go, hey, get back here, come back. They celebrate holiness. They don't think, man, you're the weirdo that's not going to do this, right? They want your marriage to last. They want your faith to be strong and your witness to be consistent. As I've been talking about wrong voices, maybe there's no doubt that many of you realize that, hey, maybe there's some wrong voices in my life. In fact, some of you are listening to a lot of wrong voices. It's time to do the hard work of ending those relationships. You'll never be able to hear from the right voices when you have the wrong voices around you. Some people are like, why can't I hear the right voices? Because you're hanging out with the wrong voices. Wrong voices don't hang out with right voices. You know, like we had this at our school, we had this thing called Smoker's Corner. I don't know why we had it, but it was this thing. If you smoked, you could go across the corner of the school. Guess what? I wasn't a part of Smoker's Corner, okay? Because the only people that hung out at Smoker's Corner, guess what they were? They were all smokers, right? It was no big deal. It was like, hey, if you want to do that, get over here. But I'm going to be over here because my coach said if I'm around someone who does that, I'm off the team. And I want to be off the team. So what are the right voices? The right voice is someone who is ahead of you in the spiritual journey. They are mature and they are fruitful. You can't follow someone who's behind you. And guess what? You can't drag someone to where you're trying to get to because they don't want to go there anyway. So you might as well just cut bait, get them off, and then go to where you want to go. You can't follow someone who's behind you. You got to listen to people who are mature and fruitful in their Christian experience. This is the key. If they're not fruitful, they aren't mature. Mature trees, guess what? They bear fruit. Mature Christians have lives that are marked by the fruit of the Spirit. They have a little bit more love, a little bit more joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. See, the right voice will disagree with you. So if someone disagrees with you, it's not because they hate you or because they're sipping that hater rage, you know what I mean? It's because they love you and they're trying to correct you. They find something in you that says, hey, get back here. We need more people like that. The right voice who's going to disagree with you. They're honest with you. with what you want is people who don't just think like you and tell you what you want to hear. We got too many of that going on. What you need is people who love you enough, who's going to tell you the truth, who's going to say, get your butt off the couch and get a job, okay? And they'd be like, well, I don't want to get a job. I get it, you don't want to get a job, but guess what? Do you want to be here for the rest of your life? No? Okay. And then I need to upgrade. I need to take the standard from here and elevate my standard. I need to be around people who have a different standard than I do. Because guess what? Last time I checked, birds of a feather, guess what? They flock together. And so if I want to be around people who have gotten out, who've made a way where there seems to be no way, guess what? I need to be around people who take the standard and elevate the standard. Because my parents made a decision, hey, I don't like this standard, so we got to break this standard, and my job isn't to take this standard and stay here. My job is to take their standard and elevate their standard. So when my kids get to the age where they got to say, hey, that's the standard that my dad put now. We got to take our standard. We got to bring it, because then we start to live a little bit differently. That's how it works. And I know what you say, but it's hard to elevate that standard. It's hard, but guess what? But it's so worth it. It's hard, but it's worth it. Guess what? We need truth tellers in our life. My wife is the best truth teller that I have in my life. If you want to know honest reaction, just ask her. Don't worry about your feelings, because sometimes she'll say, Greg, I got to talk to you about something. Are you prepared? And bedtime, I said, no, I need a nap first, okay? Let me get a nap in, and then I'll be prepared. But you know what? My wife, she doesn't tell me the honest truth because she hates my guts. She tells me the honest truth because she loves me. And there may be something inside of me that needs to be squashed. I remember the first time I just raised my voice and a temper out of me. And my wife says, never again. She raised that finger, and she got that look in her face and the fire in her eyes. I thought, ooh, okay. When I'm a little too sensitive, I say, Rachel, I'm going to ask you something. I just need to know, am I being too sensitive? She'll say, yes, Greg, you're being too sensitive. Okay, I just want to make sure. But she tells me the truth. Why? Because she loves me. Now what we got to do is we got to be careful, because there's a difference between criticism, complaining, and evaluation. The goal of the critic is just to tear you down. I'm going to just keep tearing you down because you're going somewhere where I'm not comfortable with going. A lot of our families, they like to do the tearing. Oh, you're doing the church thing again. Okay, see how that worked out the last time. And, church did this, church did that. And you're like going, hey, okay, critical person, get out of my goal. But the goal of the complainer is to get what they want. But the goal of the truth teller is to make you better. If you don't learn how to tell the difference, you let critics and complainers set the agenda for you. So the right voice is someone who loves you, and they are caring. This is an important balance point to truth tellers. Right voices aren't mean or hateful or drinking the haterade. Some of you guys get that. You're like, yeah, I get it. They love you and have your best interest at heart. It's not easy for them to be like, hey, I see this inside. It's not easy for them. They don't take joy in it. But they know that they need to help you. Don't tune them out. Don't tune your parents out, your pastors out, or your coaches out, or anything. You may think that there's a never-ending supply of people who are going to tell you the truth. But there is not a never-ending supply. There's a more supply of people to surround ourselves with that will just tell you the truth, or that will tell you what you want to hear. I recognize that loving truth tellers with your best interests at heart are rare. They're priceless. They're a priceless treasure. So do whatever it takes to keep them in your life. Don't shut them out or shut them down. You need them. And then listen to someone who has done what you want to do. Listen to someone listen to someone who has done what you want to do. So what do you want to do? Find that person who has done it. And then you go, well, how do I do that? How do I get there? Don't ask someone, hey, how do I kick alcohol? Who's an alcoholic? That doesn't make any sense. We gotta find the person that has conquered it or is conquering it. And so how do I do that? The right voice is someone who makes good decisions because they have wisdom. Proverbs 15:7 says this, only the wise can give good advice. Only the wise can give good advice. Why would you trust someone who makes poor decisions to help you make the right decisions? You don't want your financial advisor to be broke or your health and wellness coach to be overweight, right? You out of shape. You want people who have a history of making good decisions and offering the right advice. It was funny. I was in a meeting this week and with one of our pastors at North Little Rock, Pastor Randy, who helps with all the campuses. And I said, "Here's my fear, Pastor Randy." And he says, "Here's what I will tell you. If you ever become a jerk, I will tell you." I said, "Oh, good. I'm going to need that, okay? I don't think I'm going to be a jerk in life, but you know what?" I said, I was just talking about some fears that I have. He goes, "But if you get off the rails, don't worry. I'll be your truth teller." So I was like, yes, I grabbed another truth teller this week. But the right voice is someone you have a heart connection with. Now, hear me out on this one. If you don't like someone, regardless of how wise they are, you're not going to listen to them. You see, you need a chemistry with them, some type of connection with them. It's humorous and it's also sad because some of us, we take advice from the most unlikely people. They have questionable character and a bad track record, and it makes no sense to let them be the primary voice in our lives. The right voice is someone who's like you. They have character. They are affirming, truth-telling, Bible-based givers who are willing to sacrifice their preferences to put others first. The right voice is someone who's faithful in their Christian walk. They're consistent. Watch how they treat people. Watch how they worship. Watch how they give. Watch how they respond when they don't get their way. Watch when they go out to eat and they treat the waitress or the waiter, because that tells you a lot about somebody's character. Do they just give them their order and don't even look at them, or they look them in the eye and treat them like a human being? See, there's things that you can pick up on. See, observe the fruit in their life. The right voices are people who live holy lives. The right voice is an encourager. When you leave them, man, you feel better about yourself. We had a guy at one of our churches. His name was Jerry Mentink. Jerry Mentink, man, I'd go visit him in the hospital. I'd pray for him, and guess what? I would never get the final prayer because he would be like, "Oh, let me pray for you." And I'm like, "Jerry, I'm praying for you. You can't pray for me." But he would always leave me. I felt so encouraged. I'm like, "Oh, man, I just love being around him." Guess what? Encouragers, they make you feel a little bit better when you spend time with them. You don't want to leave them. Maybe sometimes you just got to call them just to have an encouraging person in your life. I want to teach you an important principle. If someone is critical about others to you, one day they're going to be critical about you to others. Encouragers consistently find the good in others, and they don't just find it, but they say it. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, "Encourage one another, build each other up, just as in fact you are doing." Ephesians 4:29 says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Hebrews 10:24, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." What does that say? The Bible talks a lot about surrounding yourselves with the right voices. That's one reason it's important to be a part of a church family. Are there wrong voices here? Obviously there are. And you're like, "Wow, there are?" Yeah, because there's people saved and there are people that come that don't know Jesus. And that's okay because they're part of the process. They're in the journey. But there are a lot of right voices, people who will love you and have your best interest at heart. If you're coming to church but not building friendships, you got to find the right people. I want to challenge you, take that next step. Attend Sunday regularly. Attend Wednesday night. Find a ministry team. Get involved in a ministry and just to be around other people. Invite someone out to eat. If you're like, "Hey, I need to hang out with somebody. Hey, I want to go. Can we go to lunch?" And if you're like, "I can't pay for lunch," just call me. I'll be like, "Okay, I'll get your lunch. You guys go out. If you need an encouraging voice, just let me know and we'll find it for you." Proverbs chapter 12, verse 26 says, "The righteous choose their friends carefully." It's not an simplification to say that your life will change for the better if you quit listening to the wrong voices and you start listening to the right voices. So here's my final challenge to you, is be the right voice. Be realistic and evaluate yourself. In what ways are you like the false teachers in Jude? But what areas of being the right voice do you need to develop? Here's the key. Listening to the right voices is how you become a right voice.